In this concept video, we're going to be discussing vertical and phase shifts in a graph. Vertical shifts are simply shifts of the graph up or down, and phase shifts are horizontal shifts, left or right. We use the word phase shift with sine and cosine curves, but in other graphs you might just see this as a horizontal shift. When we look at this graph here, we're going to compare it to just a regular cosine curve, let's say for this one. So if we draw just a regular cosine curve, I'll try to move this up a little bit for you so you can see the bottom of the graph here. Here's what a regular cosine curve would look like. It would start at 1, then it would come down at pi over 2, then it would continue further down here and hit -1 at pi. The cosine of pi is -1. Then it would come back up at 3 pi over 2 and then continue back up and start again here at 2 pi. So if we graphed this, it would kind of look a little bit like this. Just try to do the best job when you're graphing these by hand. Make sure that it's nice and curved. We're going to indicate that this keeps on going by using some arrowheads. So this graph right here, I'll try to write this off on the right hand side, is y is equal to the cosine of theta. When you're trying to figure out what the vertical shift is, what you want to do is you want to identify the shift in either the tops, the bottoms, but what's most important really is to identify the shift in the midline. So if you need to find the midline of the new graph, let's say this other graph on top, there's a couple ways to do it. Guessing can work well if it looks easy enough, like trying to figure out that line might look like it kind of goes through here. But let me give you a for sure way of figuring this out. What I like to do is I like to draw the top line. And then I like to draw the bottom line. And I know that my midline is going to be directly in between these two. You'll notice how there's 1, 2, 3, 4 units in between the top and the bottom line. And if we go just 2 units, then we'll see the midline. Now you can identify the vertical shift from a basic sine or cosine curve. The vertical shift is simply the shift up or down that the midline makes, and the midline for a regular cosine or sine curve is right on the x-axis. So the new midline is up 3. So one thing that we could say here is that we have a vertical shift of up 3. So I'll try to write that here. I hope that you can see that through these lines. So this is our vert shift, and that's going to be up 3. Try to bold that in for you a little bit. Alright, so now the midline, which used to be for regular y is equal to cosine theta at the x-axis, is now up 3. So that's the vertical shift. Let's try to draw this green graph, and let's just shift it up and see what it looks like. So we can shift every single point up 3. So this point is at 1, it should be here at 4. This point right here at pi over 2 is at 0, it's going to be now at 3. This point at pi is at -1, so it's going to be now at 2. -1 plus 3 is 2. And then we're going to shift up 3 here, and then up 3 here. So now this graph is the graph with the vertical shift, but there's still something a little bit off about it. You'll notice that these are kind of out of phase, and that is something that you're going to hear a little bit when you see a similar shape, but they're just off a little bit, off center if you want. So if we look at this cosine curve, the next thing we want to do is we want to identify, well, exactly how far is it off? You want to look at the cosine curve here with no phase shift. And you want to ask yourself, how could we line this green graph up on this red one here? And the answer is just to move every point over by this distance. This point could move over by that distance, same thing here, same thing here, same thing there. And if every single one of the points on this curve moved over by that same distance, then it would be exactly on this other one. So if we take a look at this distance right here, this distance is pi over 4. You'll note from 0 to pi over 4 is pi over 4. So we can say that the phase shift, move this down a little bit again, so the phase shift is pi over 4. And that might be a little bit off the screen here. I'll move it down again just a little bit. There you go. Phase shift is pi over 4 right. Remember that we are looking at a cosine curve that doesn't have a phase shift, and then looking at the new curve and saying, hey, which direction would all the points have to move? And they'd have to move right by pi over 4.